The temperature is nice and warm in the Boiling Point Podcast studio, so come on in, get cozy, and let's enjoy the conversation. We empower leaders through thoughtful discussions to positively impact our world. Our host, Dave Vale, founder and CEO of Vision Coaching, Inc., is highlighting how we can thrive in business communities. Our conversations with leaders, entrepreneurs, and inspirational storytellers are shining a spotlight on empowerment. Joining Dave this week is our special guest host, Emily Roger. Let's join the conversation with Dave and Emily.
Okay, well, welcome back, listeners of The Boiling Point. If you've listened to the last few episodes, you'll know that I have a fabulous co-host with me. Believe it or not, we are in the same office, even though the light looks very different. We've been joking about that a little bit. Emily Roger.
Hello, Dave. Hello, listeners. Thanks for having me back as a co-host, filling the chair of Greg Hemmings.
Yes.
Big seat to fill.
Yeah, well, you've been awesome. I'm excited about the guests we're going to bring in today, and the fact that my wife was saying to me, I mentioned that you coming on as a co-host, and then I mentioned that Crystal being one of the guests, and she said, finally, you're getting some strong women on there instead of all these guys and stuff. So I said, that's a good point. It's a really excellent point. We need a little more balance in the podcast world, probably, or this one anyways. What have you been taking away from, before we introduce our guests and get her jumping in, but what have you been like, what's this experience been like for you so far?
Of co-hosting?
Yeah.
It has been incredible for so many reasons, but I think that being able to stay in that curious mindset and being able to get to know people and being able to chat about topics that I might, like, when else would I have the opportunity to sit down and chat with Dave Carroll? I get to chat with Bruce McLeod all the time, of really being able to meet new people, hearing new stories, new perspectives, learning a lot.
Yes. Yeah. That's what I love about I get way more out of it than every interview, actually, than probably the listeners do with guests too, or whatever. Right. And that's why you keep doing it, right? Because, or at least I do, because of just all the great learning. So such an awesome medium and such an awesome way to just connect and talk and meet people all over the place. And our guest we have now, I think, is coming from Prince Edward Island. I know that's where she lives, and that's where her businesses are. Is that right, Crystal?
Yes, I'm in Charlottetown today.
Okay. So, and Charlottetown, for anyone that doesn't know, is just this beautiful town in Prince Edward Island. And it's, I love it there. And I get, every time I get a chance to visit, I do. It's been a little bit tricky over the last little while. And it's been a very kind of COVID friendly place too, hasn't it, Crystal?
Yes, we've been quite fortunate here, really. I can't really complain. I went to a play last week for the first time in 2 years.
Wow. Okay.
Nice.
Yeah. There's those, all those activities we're looking forward to coming back. So
yeah.
Crystal, can you introduce yourself? You and I go way, way back. We've been meeting on a regular basis. We're part of the same entrepreneurial leader program cohort in Wallace McCain Institute, Emily. Crystal and I are. So I've known Crystal. It's a peer group. We've been together for almost a decade, or coming up to a decade.
Yeah, 10-year anniversary coming up.
Yeah, and it's and we're going to talk about coaching, because Crystal's become a coach recently, as well as being a CEO of StepScan. The peer group experience is pretty powerful, isn't it, Crystal?
Yeah, I can't say enough about it, really. Yeah.
Well, we got together, and you meet every month for 2 days, and then you start self-moderating, and it actually, I think it mirrors coaching a little bit, in that it's in a group setting, but you've got forum or confidentiality built in, and people bring the whole person comes in. They all happen to be entrepreneurial leaders of different companies, and the experience, and then they get speakers and all these different things. But the experience of and maybe we were lucky, we have a particularly kind of close group, But I mean, our group has literally experienced, just about everything you can imagine experiencing, right? And still intact. We lost tragically one of our cohort members died tragically in, I don't know, was it year 1 or 2? And there's been bankruptcies, there's been people exiting with great companies, there's been health marriages, dissolving and starting, kids being born. My case, right?
Yes.
I guess I'm unique in that one.
We've seen the happiest of days and the saddest of days for people that we're very close with, and that we've had the fortunate experience to support through all of that.
Yeah. Wow.
It's incredible. And actually, I think Crystal's she moderates our group. I think Emily and her story, she'd be an awesome speaker for us if she's open to it. It's just I'd love to introduce you to the larger group. So anyway, that's a kind of a personal look into, that's the background Crystal and I have. But Crystal, why don't you introduce yourself to the guest or to the listeners? I always call them the guests, the listeners, and Emily, and kind of, and maybe the topic that we're gonna jump into today.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. So my name is Crystal Trevors, and I am an Air Force brat. Grew up in the armed forces, moved around a bit, settled in the Miramichi in Chatham, and moved to Charlottetown. Big part of my 2-year plan, and I've been here 25 years.
I love your plans.
Your plan, yeah. So 25 and counting, but I do really love it here. And as Dave said, I do own a company called StepScan Technologies, and it's a medical technology, and we analyze how people walk, and we do that for medical rehabilitation. So we sell equipment to hospitals and PT clinics or physical therapy clinics and universities that do medical research, and we really offer them that opportunity to objectively measure somebody's walking patterns, and they use that information to guide treatment and develop new treatment plans. So it's something we're really proud of here, and we're into year 10 on that too, actually. And I think, for me, with the purpose of transitioning into why I became a coach, a lot of it had to do with the Wallace McCain Institute and my experiences there. And when you learn and experience purposeful conversation with purposeful outcomes, there's a magic that happens with coaching. And if anybody who's ever been coached and has experienced this magic, it's really powerful and life-changing and simple sometimes, right? And I was just really inspired by it, and actually, and Dave being a professional coach, and encouraging that it was a good route for me to take. I'm just really happy that I did it, and now not only do I get to still experience the breakthroughs of coaching as I'm being coached, but I also get to offer that back to people, and it's really rewarding.
Well, what's interesting? You're on a very, very similar trajectory, Emily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've gone through coach training before, but recently went through the Royal Rose University training, and I know for me that the power, the impact of having a coach and being able to facilitate similar experiences. Not all of our experiences are similar with coaching, but to others, and it is a rewarding field of work, that is for sure. And even with like clients who I've worked with previously, and at that time they might not be having, or they might be having certain insights, but then it can be 6 months from then or a year from then that it's like, oh, right,
together. Yeah, like to shorten the path to clarity, right? Right.
And I have those as being a coachee. I have these like, oh, right, that's how I now apply that to my life.
And I will share the first kind of breakthrough that I had, which might sound really simplistic, but as a startup CEO in a tech company, and really feeling like you have to keep your gas, like keep the keep the gas going. And I had a coach say to me, what would it be like for you to take 2 hours off in the day? No, I couldn't do that. And then it probably took me about 3 months to accept the fact that I could reach out to my staff and say, I am not available from 3 to 5 on Tuesday afternoons.
And gift yourself that.
Yeah, gift yourself 2 hours in the day where you can just go and do whatever you want. Crystal's priorities, it's still on the calendar. Now it's on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 3 to 5.
Look at you.
So that was my first coaching breakthrough. And I mean, it might not sound spectacular, but it really was for me.
Well, it's interesting. We were talking about this in the last podcast, the power of coaching and the experience. Yeah. And Bruce had been coaching Emily. So it was just interesting to hear them unpack their experience. And, but we were talking about what's showing up a lot now is this, is that our personal lives and our work lives have become through a pandemic so entwined. Not that they weren't before, but just heavily entwined because you're working from home. And I mean, right now, if you're living in New Brunswick, Canada, you're also got your kids back at home, not because of the pandemic, because of a strike. That's a whole different conversation. So I'm very reminded about where do I set up? Because the kids have taken over my office for some reason. They have dibs. I don't know why that is, but that might be a parenting thing. So we're working through all that, but just as and then we were talking about having, unleashing courage in others and in ourselves. And sometimes it's the small things that can be very courageous. So, but knowing you the way I know you, Crystal, that is big. 2 hours, and now twice, kudos to you, but that's for like someone who, knows a little bit about hustling and working hard. But that idea, our strength can be our liability too. Right. Yes. So, and Bruce, in our conversation with him, Bruce McLeod in the last podcast, an executive coach himself, he's on faculty at Royal Roads. He was, talking about, this listen, hear, understand people and and listening is such a big part of coaching. And Crystal has, and I have learned and continue to learn so much about listening. And in some of the training we do, these exercises, and they tend to be the most impactful. And I've this one particular one, and it's around listening, and you kind of set it up, and I won't give it away, but I've delivered as far away as Belgrade, Serbia, kind of all corners of North America, like literally down to, the deep south in Florida, up, in the Yukon, all through Atlantic Canada and California. And the reason I share that is because in all these different places, and every time I do this one listening exercise, what boils up is independent of, time zones and cultures, language, even to a degree, right? But it's just this misunderstood thing about how do you properly listen to stuff. So I kind of thought I'm getting a handle on it. And then I read a blog post that Crystal has, and it just gave me a whole new perspective. I was just like, and here, this good friend, almost like kind of my Atlantic Canadian sister, Crystal. And I was like, all the time she's been sitting there, I've been across for her hours and hours in these groups. And I had never really talked to her about this. And so I was, would you share that blog post? And I know Emily's read it, and Emily will be well researched on this. I'm learning from posting with her. So I'm just trying to get all my good stuff out early. Yeah.
No problem, Dave. Yeah. I just, it's something I had been meaning to do for a while, and something I'd been wanting to do for a while. And it's not common knowledge, I think, amongst most of my peers is that I've actually hearing impaired, and I've been wearing hearing aids since I was a little girl. And I was taking my coaching training, and we were taking all these, I would say all these classes, but spending a significant amount of time talking about effective listening and effective listening skills. And I found it really surprising because, and while I just contemplating that, thinking there's a lot of effort going into teaching people how to be effective listeners. And then I came to this realization that I'm really good at that because I don't really have a choice. It's just something that I've learned that if I'm not actively, consciously listening, I'm really just not participating in the conversation at all. And, I've learned a lot of things from being hearing impaired. Also, I have a son who's hearing impaired. And so I've learned a ton more about communicating with other people that are hearing impaired. And I've learned a lot of tips, like parenting a young child, a rambunctious boy that needs to be kind of roped in sometimes. Yeah, you learn that there's a combination of skills between parenting and parenting a hearing impaired child. So I wrote a blog about common courtesies, about how to effectively communicate with people when they're hearing impaired. And I think there's place for that in parenting in the workplace and with parents. And we see our population aging, and part of that is hearing impairment. And there's a whole population of people that need a little more understanding and a little bit of courtesy when it comes to communication. So that's what I wrote about.
The line in your blog that really stood out to me, and something that I've been really aware of lately, is that active listening is a conscious choice.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you have to make a conscious decision to be a part of that conversation. And that looks like, to me, is putting down your phone and like not looking at the TV and turning the radio down and creating an environment that is open to that kind of communication where it's just connected.
Yeah. And so in your blog, I was really intrigued by and curious about why the increase in the amount of people, like I think you had written by 2050, one in 5.
Yeah. And I think it's really just a correlation to our aging population.
Okay.
So, the stat is kind of in our like 40 to 54 years old. There's about a 2 to 4% people that have a disabling hearing loss. So that's like 35 decibels or more. But when you get to 60, it's 1 in 3. Right? So it's a natural aging issue for sure.
Yeah. And one thing that I've been really aware of with the mask mandate is I have a hard time, without being able to see lip reading and those those facial cues and stuff, and being able to really understand people. And so, yeah, if you could speak to that, and what changes have you felt in that?
Well, some masks are worse than others, but for a hearing aid person like myself, I actually, when I realize I can't read lips, because I do rely on lip reading, it's easier for me to close my eyes.
Really?
So if I close my eyes and listen, it just shuts out all the other senses, and it just allows me to connect and focus a little more on what's being said. Just focus on that one sense. So yes, I've had tons of experiences where you're just like, oh God, like, oh, so, you work around it. Some people will, put them down, especially like if you're in a place like a bank or something, like you can work your way around some of those situations, but it is a challenge. Absolutely.
Yeah, that would be a remarkable challenge, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I guess, because I know I'm struggling with that right now as well. I've noticed my mother has a hearing impairment. She's been wearing hearing aids for quite a while, and she probably should have been wearing them a lot sooner, to be honest. But and actually, what's interesting, Chris? I don't know if you know this, but I used to do hearing testing.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I worked for a company that would go into workplaces, and you would, and it was through workers, it was kind of a requirement through workers' compensation, and it was, and you give them tips on how, and it was usually like sawmills or any environment that was up above a certain decibel, I guess, and then you would have the records, and you would compare, and you would kind of counsel them, I guess, on how to make sure you're hearing. I remember this one gentleman came in, and he was like, he'd lost a lot of hearing. He was kind of an older guy, and probably prior, like he was in environments where they had nothing, probably, right? With screaming engines and all this kind of stuff. And, and you're in this quiet kind of space because you drive these trucks up and you have these two booths that you would use. And it was, I missed a lot of interesting people. It wasn't kind of my work just because I mean, the company was there to make money, right? So they would churn people through pretty quickly, but you'd hear these stories. But one in particular stood out where this guy was saying, he was talking about how he's been compensated for his hearing loss, and how he compared it to how his colleague was compensated for losing a thumb. And it was disproportionate. And he was saying, I've lost my life, is the way he was describing it to me. He goes, I can't go anywhere. I can't go to a restaurant. I can't go to a movie. Like, that's how pronounced it was for him. That really, obviously I'm sharing it with you. It was like probably 25 years ago. Just how isolating it can be, Crystal.
Absolutely. My grandmother lost her hearing, as she aged as well. And it's frustrating for the person. It's frustrating for the family because you're used to being able to have an easy communication, and that's lost. And really, without the corrective action of hearing aids or another type of support, they really just shut off, right? They isolate. It's hard to be a part of a crowd. You can't talk on the phone. Everything becomes quite a challenge. And even people who have the option to get hearing aids because they can afford them or they have insurance or whatever purposes, the transition to start to wear hearing aids is really a challenge that requires a lot of patience from, I think, the family and the user, and just some positive mindset too, right? Because it's a big transition. People often say, oh, it must be just like getting glasses, but it's not at all. It's not the same thing.
And so what would be some ways, like during the mask mandate now, if in speaking to someone who is hearing impaired, what are some ways to be able to communicate with them more effectively, knowing that the masks are potentially covering the lip reading?
And I think, a lot of the common courtesies that you might give to somebody, even if it wasn't with a mask, would still apply. So, background noise, that's a big one. In any kind of environment where you can reduce the amount of background noise is very, very helpful. Again, so you can really concentrate on the message that's coming through. So with that, I guess with background noise, wind noise, if you're in an outdoor environment, can be quite a challenge. So you have to be conscious of that. If you're trying to exchange information like phone numbers, addresses, just write it down on a piece of paper. And, especially if you recognize somebody struggling, hearing impaired or not hearing impaired, if somebody's struggling and they have to ask you 3 different times to repeat yourself, it gets frustrating, and maybe a little bit you can get self-conscious and just get frustrated. So it's really a good idea to just rephrase it. Sometimes just the word you're saying it, or they're not getting the letter or the word, just pick a different word and it just comes through really clear. There's just so many things, like talking face to face. Like I said, we have some rules in the house. My kids are actually moved out now. Both my teenagers are out, but no yelling from another room. Like, there was no yelling up the stairs, supper's ready. We had a practice of walking up the stairs, going into the room and connecting with the person and saying supper's ready. And I mean, that's just really maybe a courtesy that everybody could do. It's just a little more pleasant.
You're making me think of my home environment right now. Right.
or the drilling that's going off.
That I think told these don't pick up. So I'm hoping that's the case.
But we still
yeah.
You can't hear the drilling noise in the background. You guys are good.
But
but it would be funny.
There's pretty loud drilling actually going. Thanks for pointing that out. You know what's actually, so on that, it's about probably, like you say, being conscious about active listening, and when you can't reduce distractions. It's interesting, Crystal, use the idea of just closing your eyes and getting to that one sense. I actually, and I've talked about this probably, if anyone, for the few people who've listened to a lot of these podcasts, like we were talking before earlier about, coaching remotely, right, or digitally, and And I'm one of those people that I don't mind doing this if a client wants to be on Zoom. And in your case, you were talking about being coached by Bruce, and it could be really helpful because you're expressive in your body language, as is what I took from that. What I've found, like if someone, so I'd happy to go to a Zoom. I think sometimes the physical stuff gets in the way of what I'm hearing, and taking in, you know what I mean? And focusing on, and I actually find that talking over the phone is actually, for me, easier. Maybe that's probably selfish, but I feel like I can, like, this concept of listen, understand a lot more. It's just maybe the cadence of the speech, or the tightness of the voice, and all these little nuances, that especially if you know your client quite well, that you can pick up on. Does that make sense for you guys?
Yeah, no, I definitely can relate to that in certain circumstances where I do, coaching just with clients over the phone for certain clients who don't want to do Zoom, and how I can at times almost like more intently listen, because that is all of my focus is just on what they are saying.
And maybe a little more time to reflect too, like between the question and the answer, reflection, the next question. It just seems more natural to be able to pause. That's what I find. There's a nice ability to just pause and really think about what you want to say next and where you want the session to go.
Yeah. Well, and how sometimes, I'm always so conscious when I get on my computer, it's shut everything else off, turn off every notification, because I can so easily get thrown off. And then next thing you know, it's, oh, wait, what were we talking about? What's your name again? And it's just like eliminate all of that.
Yes.
Well, in fact, that happened at our first interview when you were the guest, and we're having technology issues, Crystal, and but my phone was binging and this and that. I couldn't get into the conversation. I was trying very hard, but I was like, I'm totally distracted right now. Like, I'm worried about my internet shutting down. Like, it was, so it's, so I guess what we're getting at is, your recommendations of the courtesies with a hearing impaired person, really, is it fair to say they apply to everyone?
I would agree. That's definitely one of my biggest takeaways. So just, the courtesies that you afford to somebody that's hearing impaired can be applied to everybody. And like when I think about what they're doing in the schools, I don't know what it's like in New Brunswick, but in PEI, the educational system support for hearing impaired children is amazing. And at this point, I believe every school has an FM system, every classroom. So it used to be a personal FM system that my son would wear, and the teacher would wear a microphone. And so he would have the technology that would basically allow him to have a modulated hearing level. And but then they moved it to putting FM systems in all the schools. Now all the children get to listen without too much, not just really having to concentrate so hard, because listening takes a lot of energy. And when you're hearing impaired, it takes even more energy. So it's like, imagine being at a concert or in a loud restaurant or at a party, and, you're trying to have a conversation, but it's too loud. And sometimes for a hearing aid person, that's basically their experience most of the time. So, so just again, in the school systems, I'm having this FM system. It just really makes it easier for the kids to learn. That's
awesome. So every kid has access to it.
Yep. And it's just speakers in the classroom, and the teachers, and just every angle and every seat in the room, every kid is going to have the same level of sound.
Wow. Because there's probably a lot of, it must go undiagnosed in a lot of people if it's not really severe. Would that be, do you know if there's any data on that, Crystal?
Well, my son is 20 now. And when he was born, there was no kind of hearing testing. And when my daughter was born 3 years later, every baby born has a hearing test. There's technology for testing the hearing of newborns. And so again, I'm not sure what the situation in New Brunswick, but since 2003, every baby in PEI is tested for hearing impairment. So that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, when I read the blog, at the end of it, it was, wow, yeah, Emily, how can you apply all of these things to everyone, to every conversation, whether someone is hearing impaired or not? They're just incredible takeaways and conscious things that we can be doing to be a more effective listener and communicator.
Yeah. And I really love just the courtesy of saying the person's name first. So when you have a hearing impaired 6-year-old and you say, supper's ready, Evan, come for dinner, he doesn't really connect until he hears Evan. So everything that happened before that isn't really, he just hasn't comprehended it. And so then you're repeating yourself. So, but I've learned through that experience that anytime you want to get somebody, you get their attention first, pause, and then, have your conversation, ask your question, state whatever it is that you want to talk about. But it just saves a lot of back and forth and energy. And I think people appreciate the signal.
100%. Yeah, no, for sure. Any other nuggets that you pulled out of the blog post? And we'll put that up.
Yeah, it's like, what have I learned from my child? Things like, obviously you learn patience. Being an effective listener and a good communicator requires patience. Just, again, it's maybe just being there, like just being present.
Yeah, that's one of the big takeaways that I got from reading your blog post, and even from this conversation, is being fully present. And my nephew is 8, and him and I were playing Lego over the summer, and I was in Fredericton visiting him, and he asked me a few times during the day I was working if I would go and play Lego with him. Finally, I said yes. Went up to his room. Normally I would jump on it, but I had things that I kind of needed to be doing, and or I thought I needed to be doing. So sitting there playing Lego with him, but I had my phone there, and I was about 20% involved in Lego and 80% involved with what was going on my phone. And he called me out on it. My nieces and my nephew all called me Auntie Emma. He's like, Auntie Emma, you're not playing Lego with me. And I was like, wow, Ari, yeah, you're right. And I'm sorry. And it was like, I was called, it just made me sit back and kind of reflect on what areas am I not being fully present in what it is that I am doing, and in whether it's a conversation with someone, if I'm not fully present, that people pick up on it. And it's not even the fact that people pick up on it. It's just, it's not okay. If I'm going to commit my time to something, if it's playing Lego, if it's a call, if it's a whatever it is, that I want to be intentional and fully present.
Yeah. And you're right. People do notice. I definitely notice. I would say, Dave, you can comment on that too. But when you're having a conversation with somebody and they're half in and half out,
Yeah. Yeah. No, in fact, I've come to learn, and I believe that one of the more disrespectful things you can do is pretend listen. And or half listen. And that kind of is part of this exercise we do and around storytelling, and you get people to half listen. And it's amazing, the reaction, and how, because unfortunately, I think a lot of people take from that you're not interested in my story. If you dig deeper than that, into that, you're not really interested in me and, and who I am. And, and the people can feel devalued just from listening. Right. Yeah. That's why I always find surprising and then if you ask anyone, they'll say, are you good listener? Oh yeah, I listen, but I can listen, and I can also, do an email and do something at the same time. Yeah, no, it doesn't work that way. Yeah. Well, I mean, at least from this conversation, we're picking up on that. Just in as we kind of round this up here, Crystal, is there how do you think, I guess, you're showing up differently, or maybe what, that having hearing loss and learning strategies and kind of all the things you've learned, with Evan as well, who's your son. How does that show up in your coaching, do you think?
Well, obviously, like I said, I'm a very good listener. Mm-hmm. I've learned how to listen from a very early age. I just like being present. It's a natural skill at this, point, and the opportunity to be able to take that gift and use it to help people is amazing. Who would have thought that just being a good listener could turn into a, whole supportive career choice, right?
So amazing. Yeah, actually, that's good. Well, so in a way, it's been a gift, right, for you. There's a silver lining there for sure.
Yes. So lots of life lessons, right? For sure. And, you can focus on, they say the disability, but I think about what my life would be like if I didn't have hearing aids. I would be isolated. I would not be the CEO of a med tech company. Like if the technology didn't exist, my life would be very hard. Wow. So I choose to celebrate the advancement of technology for hearing impaired people over being hearing impaired.
Yeah, that's such a great way of looking at it. And
yeah, and I think if our family and friends could kind of get that lesson too, like we're all going to have friends and family that are going to end up with hearing loss, and it's okay, right? There's a fix for it. You can get hearing aids, you can adapt, you can learn how to live with them, and you can enjoy your life just like you did before.
Yeah, good point. So for people someone listening and saying, geez, I'd like to talk to Crystal about, having her be my coach. What's your kind of ideal client profile, and how do people find you? Because you're offering a little bit different type of coaching than we would at Vision Coaching.
Yeah. So the coaching training I took specific was transformational life coaching. And because I am an executive leader, and there's a coaching around that. And I just found that I'm drawn more towards people who are maybe not so much looking at executive coaching, but more life coaching. And the people that I've coached find that the end of our time together, what they walk away with is this calm confidence that just kind of resonates through their life in all aspects. So I get a lot of reward out of that. It feels really good.
So it's neat that she, and StepScan is no, wilting flower. Like it's like she's going for it. But at the same time, Crystal, you decided, you know what, I want to, it's almost like you had this calling, right?
Exactly.
That you had to listen to. And there's a wonderful story behind that. But people can read more, or like, what's the website, your coaching website?
Yeah. So it's livejoycoach.com.
livejoycoach.com.
So the company is called Live Joy Coaching. And I called it that because, there was a moment where you question, what is it like to live joy? And am I living joy? And how can I do that better every day? And so that's kind of more like I really want to teach people how to live joy.
Yeah.
Life. Yeah.
It's such a pleasure to get to chat with you. And I've learned so much just from this, from this conversation. And at the end of the Boiling Point podcast, we do the takeaways. So and
go for it, Emily.
Yeah, I just I think I kind of already, spoke to mine just around the takeaway of that hearing impaired or not, that active listening is a choice, and to make that conscious choice to how can we be more present in every single thing that we do. So thank you for reminding me of that and helping me more deeply reflect on that.
You're welcome, Emily.
Yeah, thanks, Crystal. Well, for me, I think there's. I mean, you stole mine. I should have gone first. I remember that I was supposed to go first, but I was just reminded of the isolation that's involved, and again, that isolation happens for a lot of people. And, certainly we're talking about someone with struggling to hear. But, it's maybe just people that aren't being listened to. Right. And trying to find an opportunity to make sure when you can, because it does take energy to listen and, pick your spots, but, hear someone else's story. And that's funny that story from years ago in an audio testing booth, came up, and I distinctly remember this guy, and it was a real gift what he shared in terms of my understanding, and because it applied to my mother. And I thought, oh man. And you know what, to make matters worse for her, she would have along the way, she had this virus that would hit her vocal cords. So she has trouble hearing. And then she would have these, like 2 weeks, she couldn't talk. And she would talk about the isolation around that. And oh my gosh. But what was really interesting at the same time, it was just hard to include her in conversations because and it was less about like recognizing that in groups, especially, she just retreat, and she's a very forceful character, like a personality. And to see that happen is like, it's a reminder of, the value of how important communication is and expressing ourselves. So, cool. And people know how to find you. What about you, Crystal? Anything you're taking away from just being a guest on the Boiling Point?
I guess it's just solidifying to me. Same. It's funny. I wrote this blog and I'm doing this podcast, and it's these little common, like these little courtesies and how important they are. And now that my kids have moved out, that I can still apply them to clients and employees and friends and family around me. And I think we'll all be better for it.
Awesome. Totally. We're going to get Geneviève to, I do want to point out the difference in quality of Emily's picture and my picture. Like this, like I'm in this dark shade. This is like, she's got this like this angel over her shoulder. And it's like, we are in the exact same office space. You wouldn't believe that. Geneviève, can you do some editing on that video? I think I'm in the...
I can try, but I think it's just Emily has that natural glow. I think it's just, I might just have to leave that one alone.
I think that's a good point. I think an excellent point. Can you do what do we call it when the
extra, where we're going to share our social media and our website information. So if you want to find out more about the Boiling Point, head over to boilingpointpodcast.com. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and you can find us on any podcast platform. And what you'll also find, and something that we'd encourage people to do, is anytime that we use hashtags, which makes it easier for people to find our content, we capitalize every word in the hashtag, which makes it more accessible for people who are using screen reading technologies, who have dyslexia or other cognitive issues that they're dealing with. So if you share something from the Boiling Point, just capitalize your hashtags, and it makes it a lot more accessible for a lot of people out there.
Now, what an interesting takeaway. That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
So thanks for there we go. Crystal, thank you. Lovely seeing you. Talk soon. Thanks for coming on. Emily, been a real pleasure. We've done, how many now? We're four?
We're four.
Yeah, I think you gotta, you wouldn't know, right? That Emily's only done 4 podcasts, Crystal?
She's natural.
I know. Totally. I know there's thousands of listeners will say, move over, Dave. And we take over.
Nope. I'll sit beside you though, Dave.
Okay.
Anytime.
Okay. Oh, thank you. I need to build my confidence up here. Okay. Well, bye everyone. And like Geneviève said, please listen wherever you can. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Boiling Point podcast. Remember to subscribe and rate our podcast on your favorite listening platform. To find out more, head to our website at boilingpointpodcast.com. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. To find out more about Dave Vale's work, head over to visioncoachinginc.com. Thanks for listening, and make sure to check out our next conversation.